On this episode, we're going to do things a little bit different. Usually, historically, it's a long history. It's only been a couple of episodes. We've talked about the progression and life of my daughter Madeline and and the growth of our family. This episode is going to be about hiring a nanny. And I bring that up specifically because of the scenario that we more or less have just encountered. And luckily, at the very end, there is a happy ending. With that said, how to hire a nanny, why you should hire a nanny, if you're in the market of hiring a nanny, whatever it may be, it ultimately depends on your comfort level, and it also depends on your financial situation. My wife and I are lucky enough and blessed to be able to financially afford a nanny. People who may not necessarily know me, my mother passed away a couple years or so ago, and I don't necessarily have that family-ish, a full family support. However, we'd have a very much so amazing family support. So we have one grandmother support, or in this case, Nana, maybe not two Nanas. And shout out to what I would call babci, which is a grandmother in Polish. That would absolutely be my mom's name, and she would hate every second of it, and deep down inside, it would make me slightly happy. So for in this case, babci and Nana, amazing. We're very blessed to have Nana, and we couldn't literally do this entire week if it wasn't for her. With that said, how to hire a nanny, why you should hire a nanny. A nanny in particular is an individual that's going to help you with a lot of your day-to-day activities with the baby. Primarily wake windows. It should be pretty obvious that that's more or less what their help is. However, you can ultimately hire a nanny, or within a particular contract, get them to do things outside of the nanny thing, outside of the baby, whether it be cleaning up, etc., etc. All right, so we have the foundation down. Let's move on to a little bit more complex things. Hiring the nanny. We used care.com, okay? We then since have used Facebook. So these are two platforms that I would highly recommend doing your due diligence in, but more on Facebook in a little bit. So we used care.com. We signed up for the service. We posted the job more or less. We tried to be as transparent and honest as possible. My wife, who was on maternity leave, was scheduled to due back in March, right? Now, we hired this person in January. When we were doing that, we probably found about 4 or 5 people that we thought ultimately that they would be a really good fit for us. We ended up interviewing every single one. We had a lot of really good vibes with a lot of people. However, we ended up using what we believed was the most qualified individual. The most qualified individual to us at that time was qualifications. So although we did like emotionally different people, we decided to logically choose the individual that we believed was the most qualified in that moment based on qualifications. Long story short, that did not necessarily pan out. And there were some issues with said individual that I don't want to necessarily get into, but I will talk about a little bit more of the results of that. The second thing is agencies, nanny agencies. After learning a little bit more about this network of nannying, I found out a lot about what are called nanny agencies. Now, a nanny agency, I'm sure, can be a really good thing. My personal experience, I don't know if I would ever do that, and I probably will never do that again. The reason why is because this particular nanny agency then goes ahead and vets their particular people. Their particular people then go through, basically will get assigned to your family, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. But there's a whole business model around this. And it's more or less, from my research, has become like the nanny version of influencer marketing. It's like a really easy way in order to make money. It's a really easy way to be able to, like, take individuals. I'm trying to not use a particular phrase that belongs in relatively urban areas that require other human beings using each other. I'm not going to use that phrase. But anyways, more or less, nanny agencies are not for my family, for our family. So my suggestions: we hired somebody based on the qualifications of that particular individual. That person had credentials, everything, pretty much everything, right? On paper was incredible. Coming into the family, coming into the home, we found relatively that it may not necessarily be true. And there are a lot of things that have happened. Again, I'm not going to get into, but overall, all you have to know is that sometimes the most qualified person isn't always best for the job. And that's more or less the story that I'm trying to explain. The most qualified person on paper isn't always the best. Now, in a business setting, which is predominantly my background, it probably can be. But what I found throughout the course, and I kind of hate myself to a degree for not trusting my judgment and kind of using the best qualified approach for my family, but using the complete opposite of that at my job. I usually base decisions off of the human aspect of it. Are they a good person? Do they have, and then the person that we chose was a good person, and is a good person, but just wasn't a good person for us. I usually, from a Penji background, I usually hire based on how do they make me feel. Are they hardworking? Do they have a good family setting? So on and so forth, and a lot of other things. Anyways, I digress. We hired somebody based on the best qualified position, and I don't necessarily think that we won't do that again. Instead, what I wish that we did was that we would find a nanny that is the best fit for our family. And that's based on, and the litmus test for this, oddly enough, is actually, will I drink a beer with this person or have a cocktail with this person after hours? Or do I want to go to the bar with this person, outside of being working inside of the home? And if that is not answered as a yes, then moving forward, we will never hire that nanny. We want to be able to work with somebody specifically that we can talk to, that we can vibe with, that we can joke with, but also receive feedback. My wife and I are very type A people, and so we have pretty much everything mapped out down to a science. Time frames in terms of bed. Now, obviously, there's always a little bit of wiggle room, but for the most part, we follow a pretty relatively strict program for our daughter, at least in the very beginning, and that is why our daughter has been sleeping pretty much 10 to 12 hours every single day since month 2.5. So I feel like, relatively speaking, it is working, and at least for our child, it is working. So fast forward, we ended up on the day in which that my wife was going back to work. The nanny quit on us, and that's awesome, right? So now we got screwed and we didn't have a nanny. So we're kind of fumbling around. My wife decided to go on Facebook. We found this amazing person that's going to be starting on Monday, and I'm sure we could always talk about that at a later time, but we found them on Facebook. We talked to about 3 to 4 additional individuals, interviewed them, spoke with them, and for the longest time I always thought that an older person was actually the best fit because they're most qualified, that they've had more experience, they've had just the history of dealing with babies and can kind of get a better understanding of the feels and things like that. And so far, just based on 1 or 2 interactions, I can already tell that a younger person is actually just as qualified, if not more qualified, to do this job than that of someone who is much, I wouldn't say older, but just more experienced. So when hiring a nanny, sometimes, again in my situation, hiring a nanny with the best qualified person isn't always the best case. Instead, I would say, and I would suggest to kind of recap this long-winded video, hire based on your feels, hire based on the beer metric, hire based on energy, I would say. If the person delivers good vibes and they're able to more or less be goofy with your child, I think that is a recipe for success. Because if you are goofy, especially me, I am very goofy with my daughter, you want the same. Because when crap hits the fan, the baby has snot, whatever else it may be, you want to make sure that that person is able to adjust. And when we were doing the interviews, I asked that very specific question. What do you do when your child, when the child is crying crazy and you cannot recover, just nonstop? Well, the answer that I wanted and ultimately received was, well, if they're a 10, I have to bring them down to an 8. After the 8, I bring them down to a 5. From the 5, I bring them down to a 2, and so on. To me, that is the best answer, because what that does is that shows the individual is, I would say, aware, self-aware that the baby is like really bad, and you have to find a way to just bring that down to some degree. You know, obviously check the diaper, check the food scenario, which I think is like the most basic of answers. But once you determine what the potential issue is, and it still goes on, that's the hard part. If it's still going, you have to reassess and reevaluate. And that to me is a good nanny, and that to me is a good caretaker. In general, it's a good parent, whether it be a nanny or whatever it may be. So I won't recap because I already recapped. I hope this video finds you well. I hope it wasn't a long-winded answer, although it was. I hope you got some value of it. Be careful with who you hire. Trust the person that you hire, and love the person that you hire. And of course, love your family. Thank you so much for watching today. Appreciate it. Slight update to the background. A couple more lights. I feel like I need a little bit more better lighting. If you have any suggestions, feel free. As you can tell, it is pink for my daughter. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.